It was supposed to be a quiet farewell, the kind of funeral where tears fall gently and memories linger softly in the air like incense. But that morning, in the sleepy town of Fair Hollow, silence was shattered by something no one expected. A dog's relentless, heart-wrenching bark. Inside the small white chapel, people had gathered to say goodbye to Eleanor Mayfield, the woman who had touched nearly every soul in that town. She was a neighbor who fed stray cats, the widow who left fresh bread on porches during storms, the old lady who called every dog in the park her sweet child. Eleanor had passed peacefully in her sleep, or so they thought. Her mahogany coffin rested at the front of the church, adorned with daisies, her favorite. Candles flickered in the corners. The priest stood solemnly at the pulpit, Bible in hand. Mourners sat with bowed heads, the room hushed except for quiet sniffles. But then came the barking. It started low, a single confused sound. Woof! Then again. Woof! Woof! All heads turned. At the foot of Eleanor's casket stood Max, her beloved German shepherd. He was tall, noble, his fur grizzled with age, but his eyes were blazing. And in that moment, those eyes didn't look sad. They looked terrified. He barked again, sharper this time. Louder, urgent. "Someone get him out of here," whispered an elderly man in the second row. "He's grieving," said a woman softly. "Let him be." But Max wouldn't let it be. He lunged forward and placed both paws on the base of the coffin, barking furiously now. His chest heaved with panic, not sorrow. It wasn't the kind of cry you'd expect from a mourning dog. It was a warning. The priest cleared his throat, uncomfortable. Perhaps he is simply confused by her absence. But Max wasn't confused. He was locked in. His bark echoed across the stained glass windows, raw and primal. The sound didn't say, "I miss you." It screamed, "She's not gone." Claire, Eleanor's 32-year-old granddaughter, stepped forward hesitantly. Her hand trembled as she tried to reach for Max's collar. "Max, baby, it's okay. She's at peace now." Max snapped his head toward her, then back to casket. And then, for the first time since the barking began, he did something that made everyone freeze. He whined, a low, shaky whimper, almost like he was begging. Then came the growl, not angry, not aggressive, protective. "Should we take him out?" one of the ushers asked, stepping closer. But Claire, eyes wide, held up her hand. "Wait! He's never acted like this. Ever. Not even when Dad died." People murmured. The priest shifted uncomfortably. "Dogs sense things," an old woman whispered. "You know, before earthquakes. Before death. Or..." She didn't finish the thought, because suddenly Max did something that sent chills through the entire chapel. He placed his ear gently, deliberately, on the side of the coffin, and then he barked like a siren. Once, twice, again. People gasped. Someone dropped their hymn book. Claire's heart slammed in her chest. Is he trying to tell us something? The priest stepped down slowly, his voice uncertain. I think we should pause the service." No one moved, because no one could. All eyes were on Max, on the dog who wouldn't stop barking, on the coffin that might not be what it seemed. And in that moment, just for a second, the silence wasn't about mourning anymore. It was about fear, and something far worse. Doubt. Max's barking echoed in everyone's ears long after the priest asked for a pause. The chapel that had a moment ago been filled with whispered prayers was now drowning in a silence so thick it felt like it could choke. Claire knelt beside him, heart pounding. "Max, what are you trying to say?" The German shepherd didn't look at her. His gaze remained fixed on the coffin, ears alert, nose twitching, body trembling like a taut wire ready to snap. "I swear," Claire whispered, almost to herself, "it's like he hears something we don't." Someone in the front pew shifted uneasily. It was Mrs. Benning, Eleanor's old neighbor. Her knuckles were white from gripping the rosary in her hands. "I've seen dogs mourn," she murmured. "But this is not grief. This is the warning." A rustle of murmurs passed through the rows. What if there's something in the coffin? Maybe it's the smell of embalming chemicals. Dogs are sensitive. Or maybe she's not really gone? That last sentence wasn't spoken loud enough to catch attention, but it settled in Claire's gut like ice. The priest tried to regain control. Please, everyone, let us not jump to irrational conclusions. This is a solemn moment. But even his voice wavered. Max had now circled the coffin. He was sniffing furiously around the edges. He growled low, deep in his chest, and let out another frantic bark. Claire couldn't ignore it any longer. She turned to the priest. Can we just open it? Gasps rose from the mourners. You want to open her coffin? Someone asked, appalled. Just for a second. Claire insisted. He's not letting this go. If we ignore it and something's wrong. She's dead, Claire. A stern uncle snapped. Don't let your emotions run wild. She raised me. Claire shot back. And I raised Max with her. He knows her better than any of us. Max barked again, 3 sharp, desperate sounds. The silence that followed was different now. Not a mourning, not a respect, but a fear. Then a tiny voice spoke up. I think he's trying to protect her. Everyone turned. It was Hannah, a small girl from down the street, clutching her mother's hand. He used to bark like that when bad people came to the door. Grandma Eleanor said he always knew when something wasn't right. Claire's eyes welled up. It wasn't just grief she was feeling anymore. It was something heavier, a sense of urgency. She stepped toward the casket, hand trembling again, this time not with sorrow, but with dread. The priest stepped between her and the coffin. Miss Claire, I know you're in pain, but... A sudden thump, soft, but real. Everyone froze. Eyes darted toward the source. It had come from inside the coffin. No, the priest paled. Claire's mouth fell open. Did you hear that? Max went wild, scratching now at the bottom of the coffin, barking louder than ever before. Someone help me open it. Claire shouted. Half the room jumped to their feet. Some backed away in horror. Others stared, frozen. The tension cracked open like thunder. One brave mourner, Daniel, Eleanor's old gardener, stepped forward. Together, they gripped the edge of the lid. Max stood at their side, panting like he'd just run for miles, eyes locked on the wood as if it were a wall hiding a terrible secret. With a creak, the lid began to open, and the truth was about to break free. The morning Eleanor was found, the world outside was wrapped in silence. Snow had fallen overnight, blanketing the cottage roof and garden in pure white. Smoke no longer curled from the chimney. The curtains, usually drawn by 7 a.m., still hung closed. Claire noticed first. Eleanor's niece had been calling her aunt since the evening before. No answer. Not even a ring, just voicemail. At first, she dismissed it. Eleanor sometimes forgot to charge her phone. But by morning, something felt wrong. Claire drove out to the cottage, heart pounding, hands shaking. Max didn't bark when she pulled into the driveway. That alone made her uneasy. The door was unlocked. Inside, the house was still and cold. The fire had long gone out. The tea mug from last night sat untouched on the table. Then she found Eleanor, lying in bed, eyes closed, hands folded peacefully on her stomach. Her skin was pale, lips tinged blue. No movement, no rise and fall of breath. Max was lying beside her, silent, unmoving, his chin resting gently on her shoulder. Claire's scream shattered the silence. Paramedics arrived within minutes. They checked for vital signs, heartbeat, pulse, reflex. Nothing. The lead medic, a man with graying hair and tired eyes, exhaled quietly. I'm sorry, he said. She's gone. Max growled low and deep. It was the first time anyone had heard that sound from him. He backed into the corner, eyes locked onto the medic's hands as they moved Eleanor's body. Easy, boy, one of the paramedics muttered, holding out a hand. She's at peace now. But Max didn't move. When they placed Eleanor in the body bag, Max lunged. He didn't bite. He didn't attack. He just barked, loud, frantic, over and over. And when they zipped the bag closed, he let out a sound no one had heard before, a howl that tore through the air like grief-made flesh. Still, the world moved on. The declaration was made official. Natural death in sleep. Cause undetermined but not suspicious. Small towns don't always have the resources or the urgency for detailed autopsies, especially when the deceased was elderly and unaccompanied. Eleanor had no history of heart issues, but at her age, it wasn't unusual. Claire nodded, numb and overwhelmed, and signed the forms. Within 24 hours, funeral arrangements were made. Max refused to eat. He sat by the front door, staring at the path Eleanor used to walk. When the funeral home arrived to take the body, Max paced in circles, tail stiff, body tense. He followed them out to the van and watched it drive away until it vanished into the hills. Then he barked long and loud, and kept barking for hours. At the funeral home, they tried to keep Max away, but he escaped his leash. He found his way to the viewing room and sat by the casket before anyone even noticed. And that's where he stayed. All night, eyes locked on the sealed coffin. He growled when anyone came close. He refused food, water, even affection. Just stared and barked, as if trying to say, "This isn't over." The next morning, the day of the funeral, he was still there. And as the mourners arrived and took their seats, tried to say goodbye, Max made it impossible to ignore the truth. There was something wrong. Something no one saw. But he did. And he wasn't going to stop until someone listened. By now, the chapel was filled with uneasy eyes and stiff backs. What was supposed to be a quiet goodbye had turned into a strange, almost surreal moment. Max still sat rigid in front of the coffin, his barks coming now at rhythmic intervals, measured, deliberate, almost like clockwork. People exchanged glances. No one knew what to say. "Has he always been like this?" Someone whispered from the second row. "No," Claire replied quietly. "He's never barked like this. Not once in 7 years." The priest stood at the pulpit again, trying to bring calm. He cleared his throat, voice gentle but strained. "Grief affects us all differently. Even animals. Let us be patient." But Max didn't seem grief-stricken. He seemed alert, driven. He pawed at the coffin again, once then twice, before backing up and barking sharply. His gaze was intense, not wild. It was focus, not panic. The funeral director approached cautiously. "Ma'am," he said to Claire, "this dog is disrupting the service. I strongly recommend we remove him." Claire shook her head. "No." Her voice was firmer than she intended. "He's not just barking. He's trying to say something." Max barked again, louder now, frustrated, almost angry. A little girl in the back, no older than 7, tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mommy," she whispered, "maybe she's not really dead." The words hung in the air like a ghost. The mother shushed her quickly, but several heads turned. Claire's heart was beating too fast now. Something wasn't right. She could feel it in her chest like a wire pulled too tight. Max wasn't acting out of pain. He was acting out of certainty. Max had always been sensitive. Eleanor often said he could sense things no one else could. Storms before they came, when she was about to faint, or when someone near the gate wasn't safe. "He knows," she used to say, smiling and stroking his fur. "He always knows." So why wouldn't anyone believe him now? The priest tried again. "We are here to honor Eleanor's memory, to release her soul in peace." Max growled. It wasn't a threatening growl. It was low, vibrating, filled with warning. Claire stepped closer. She looked into his eyes and saw something that froze her blood. Desperation. Max turned to her, barked once, then looked at the coffin and whimpered. She couldn't take it anymore. "Open it," she said. Everyone froze. The priest blinked. "Pardon?" "I said open the coffin." "Claire," one of the relatives said gently, "you're just upset. We all are." "No," she snapped. "You didn't know her the way I did. And you didn't know Max." Max barked again, as if agreeing. Claire turned to the funeral director. "Please, just open it. 1 minute. That's all I'm asking." The man hesitated, caught between professionalism and pressure. Max stood up, tail stiff, muscles taut. He gave one final bark, so piercing that it echoed through the church walls. The funeral director sighed. "All right," he said reluctantly, "but be prepared for what you may see. Claire nodded, her throat tight. I am. Because somehow, deep down, she already knew. Something was terribly wrong. And Max had known it all along. Just as the funeral director reached for the casket's latch, the chapel doors creaked open. The cold wind rushed in with a gust of falling snow. Heads turned. Some gasped. There, wrapped in a navy blue coat and carrying a leather satchel, stood a woman in her late 60s. Her silver hair was pulled back, and her eyes, sharp, calculating, moved straight to the coffin. "Stop," she said firmly. Her voice, though calm, cut through the tension like a knife. The priest blinked. "I'm sorry, who are you?" Claire turned, stunned. "Dr. Ross?" The woman nodded and walked briskly down the aisle. "Yes, Dr. Helen Ross. I was Eleanor's personal physician for nearly 12 years. She looked at Max, who had gone quiet now, tail low, eyes locked on her. He recognized her. "Why are you here?" Claire asked, confused but strangely relieved. "I heard what was happening," Helen said, setting her bag down. "I got a call from one of the neighbors. Said the dog wouldn't stop barking at the coffin, that something felt off." She turned to the priest and funeral director. "I need to examine the body. Now!" The room erupted. Several people stood. "What is this? She's already been declared dead. This is ridiculous. She's been in there for over a day." But Claire stepped forward. "Please, let her check." The director hesitated again, caught between protocol and panic. But something about Helen's voice, her certainty, felt solid. Max let out a low whine. "I treated Eleanor for a rare condition," Helen said, glancing at the coffin. "It's called catalepsy. It can cause the body to appear dead. No breathing, no heartbeat, total muscular rigidity." She paused. "It's rare, but it's real." And she had it. The air changed instantly. People froze, their skepticism cracking like thin ice. "She had a few minor episodes over the years," Helen continued. "We thought it was under control. But if she suffered a full cataleptic state, alone in her bed, she could have been misdiagnosed." Claire's mouth opened slightly. "You never told me that." "She asked me not to worry the family," Helen said softly. She was afraid people would panic. The priest's hand trembled as he crossed himself. "Dear Lord." Max barked once, sharp, urgent. The decision was made. The funeral director moved aside. Hands trembling, he unlatched the casket with slow, deliberate movements. The room held its breath. Helen stepped closer, pulling on a pair of gloves from her satchel. Max didn't bark. He didn't move. He just stood, watching, his body tense, like he was waiting for someone to finally see what he already knew. With a soft creak, the coffin opened. Helen leaned in. Everyone watched. "No pulse, no breath," she murmured. Then she pulled out a small light and gently opened Eleanor's eyelids. She stared, then gasped. She's tracking," Helen whispered. Her pupils just dilated. A collective gasp spread through the room. Helen quickly checked again. Pulse, neck, wrist, lips. "Faint pulse," she said louder now. "She's alive. We have a pulse." Chaos broke loose. Some people cried. Others clutched the pews for balance. The priest fell to his knees, praying aloud. Claire rushed forward, hands to her mouth in disbelief. Max let out a low, relieved whimper and rested his head gently on the edge of the coffin. In that moment, there was no denying the truth. Eleanor hadn't died. She'd been trapped inside her own body. And the only one who'd known was the dog who refused to give up. The moment Dr. Ross confirmed a faint pulse, the entire chapel fell into stunned silence. It was as if the world had stopped spinning. Claire stumbled backward, hand over her chest, her breathing uneven. "She's alive?" she whispered, barely able to believe her own words. Max whimpered again, this time softer, almost like a sigh of relief. He slowly lay down next to the coffin, ears still perked, but his posture finally relaxing. "Yes," Dr. Ross said firmly, her hands moving quickly over Eleanor's fragile form. "Her pulse is shallow, but it's there. We need to move, now. Call 911. She barked at the funeral director. Tell them we have a catalepsy patient misdiagnosed as deceased. We need emergency transport to the hospital. Immediately. He stood frozen for a moment, then scrambled to grab his phone, hands trembling as he dialed. Claire leaned over the coffin and stared at her mother's face. Eleanor's complexion was pale, but not as cold as one would expect. And then, ever so slightly, Claire saw the corner of her mother's lip twitch. "Oh my God," she breathed. "She's fighting." People began to weep. Soft cries, shocked gasps, hands over mouths. One woman fainted. Another man sat down, clutching a rosary and muttering prayers through shaking lips. The priest stood stiffly at the altar, his eyes fixed on the coffin like he couldn't look away. "All these years of sermons," he whispered, "and I've never witnessed something like this." Dr. Ross took a thermal blanket from her bag and carefully wrapped it around Eleanor. "We need to keep her warm and stimulate blood flow," she instructed. "Claire, talk to her. Use her name. Familiar voices can help bring her back." Claire nodded, her eyes filling with tears. She bent low, brushed Eleanor's gray-streaked hair gently with her fingers, and whispered, "Mom, it's Claire. I'm here. You're safe now. We know you're alive. Max told us." At the sound of her name, Eleanor's eyes twitched beneath their lids. Claire's heart skipped a beat. Dr. Ross saw it too. "Good. That's good. Keep going." "Mom, it's okay," Claire continued, voice quivering. "Max never left your side. He knew. He never gave up on you. He saved you." Max let out a soft bark and stood again, licking Eleanor's hand gently. His tail wagged once, then again, slow but sure. And that's when it happened. Eleanor's hand moved. Slightly. A twitch. Then a curl of the fingers. Then, unmistakably, her knuckles shifted as if trying to grab something. She's responding. Dr. Ross cried out, checking her vitals again. Her pulse is strengthening. The ambulance sirens echoed in the distance now, drawing closer. Claire sobbed openly. "She's coming back to us." Max whined again, almost like a cry of joy. He nudged Eleanor's hand with his snout, gently, lovingly, urging her to stay. Within minutes, paramedics burst into the chapel. The casket was now fully open. Eleanor lay wrapped in warmth, life slowly crawling back into her body. They lifted her carefully onto a stretcher, oxygen mask placed over her nose, wires attaching to her chest. But even as they moved her, Claire noticed her lips part, just slightly, as if she were trying to speak. "She's gonna be okay," Dr. Ross said, gripping Claire's arm. "She's got a long road ahead, but she's gonna be okay." The stretcher wheeled past Max. He followed to the door, tail wagging, then stopped and sat, watching, as if to say, "My job here is done." But deep down, everyone in that room knew Max had just saved a life, not with barks alone, but with love, loyalty, and a belief no human could match. The hospital room was warm, quiet, and filled with the faint beeping of monitors. A vase of fresh lilies sat by the window. Claire sat beside the bed, holding her mother's hand gently in hers. Max lay curled up on the floor, head resting on his paws, eyes never leaving Eleanor. It had been 4 days since the miracle. 4 days since the funeral that never was. 4 days since a loyal dog had refused to let the world bury his best friend. Eleanor stirred slightly, her breathing steady but soft. Her body was still weak, recovering from the trauma of near death and the days trapped in a state of paralysis. But the color had returned to her cheeks. The nurses smiled every time they checked her vitals. And Max, he remained her shadow. "He's barely moved," one nurse whispered Claire. "Only eats when you do. He sleeps here every night." Claire nodded. He waited for her once before. He'll do it again. Dr. Ross entered the room with her clipboard, wearing a relieved smile. "She's improving steadily," she said, flipping through charts. "Strong heartbeat. Normal brain activity. I've never seen a recovery quite like this." Claire's voice cracked. "Do you think she knew? That she was trapped inside her own body?" Dr. Ross nodded slowly. "Most likely. People with catalepsy remain fully conscious. They just can't move or speak. It's like being buried alive, but silently." Claire shuddered and gripped her mother's hand tighter. God! But she made it back, the doctor said, because someone never gave up. They both looked at Max. He raised his head and wagged his tail softly. Later that afternoon, Eleanor opened her eyes. Just a flicker at first. Then slowly, her gaze searched the room. When they landed on Claire, her lips trembled. "Mom," Claire whispered, tears already forming. "Can you hear me?" Eleanor nodded weakly. Claire burst into sobs and kissed her mother's forehead. "You came back to us. You really came back." And then, almost impossibly, Eleanor smiled. Her eyes fell on Max. He stood, tail wagging furiously now, and padded to the bedside. Eleanor's lips moved. Claire leaned in, straining to hear. "Max!" It was barely audible, but it was enough. Max gently placed his paws on the edge of the bed and let out the softest bark, half cry, half celebration. News of the miracle spread like wildfire. Local media picked up the story first. Then national networks came calling. Headlines flooded the internet. Dog saves woman mistaken for dead. Loyal shepherd stops funeral. Saves owner's life. Medical miracle. Catalepsy misdiagnosis death. Claire did her best to protect her mother's privacy, but the public fascination couldn't be contained. Everyone wanted to know about Max, the dog who refused to accept loss. The dog who barked at death and won. Animal lovers around the world sent gifts, letters, and artwork. A children's book author even reached out to write a story inspired by Max's loyalty. Through it all, Eleanor began to regain strength. She whispered more, moved her hands, smiled at her daughter, and every time Max came close, she reached for him with fragile fingers that had once been lifeless. "He saved me," she told Claire one evening. I could hear everything. The prayers, the cries, the silence. But I held on because I knew Max wouldn't let go. Claire couldn't reply. She just nodded, brushing tears from her cheeks. Max curled up beside the bed, eyes closing peacefully at last. He didn't need to fight anymore. Eleanor was coming home, and this time she'd walk out the front door, not be carried through the back of a chapel. The day Eleanor came home, the entire neighborhood watched. It wasn't a celebration. It was reverence. A quiet awe blanketed the street as the ambulance gently pulled up to the small white cottage where Eleanor had lived for decades. The house hadn't changed, but something inside it had, something sacred. Claire helped her mother from the stretcher. Eleanor's steps were slow, guided, but her eyes were bright with life. Every inch forward was a victory. Max walked beside her, never leaving her side, his body brushing gently against her legs, as if he were physically holding her up. The neighbors clapped softly. A few wept. No one spoke too loudly. It was as if even sound dared not break the miracle. Eleanor reached the front porch, turned toward Max, and whispered, "We made it, didn't we?" Max barked once. Soft, proud, Claire opened the front door, and mother, daughter, and dog stepped inside. Together, alive, the house welcomed them with a scent of old books, familiar wood, and warmth. Claire had spent the last 2 days cleaning, airing out rooms, and preparing Eleanor's favorite tea for when she arrived. She had even moved a bed downstairs near the window, so her mother wouldn't need to climb stairs yet. Max immediately curled up beside it. Just like before, Eleanor said with a chuckle, easing herself into the bed, "He's still guarding me like I might vanish." Claire placed a teacup gently on the nightstand. "I don't think he'll ever stop." They shared a long, emotional look. Outside, dusk was falling. Birds called softly from trees. The world was calm again. But inside those walls, something much deeper stirred. As days passed, Eleanor's strength returned faster than anyone expected. By the end of the first week, she was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping her favorite chamomile, with Max resting at her feet. "I remember everything," she told Claire one morning. Claire blinked. Everything. Eleanor nodded. The voices, the prayers, the footsteps around the coffin. "I couldn't scream, but I was screaming inside." Claire's hands trembled slightly. "I heard you," Eleanor continued. "I heard you tell me goodbye." Claire looked down, ashamed. "I didn't know." But I also heard Max, she added, eyes shimmering. That's what kept me awake. He wouldn't stop. Not once. He barked like his soul was being torn apart. That pulled me back. She reached down and gently touched Max's head. He nuzzled her palm like he had 1,000 times before. It wasn't long before word of Eleanor's return home reached the world again. Journalists wanted interviews. Doctors requested to study her case. Faith leaders wrote articles calling it a resurrection in our time. Claire turned most of them away. This is not a spectacle, she said firmly. This is sacred. But one thing she did allow, a visit from children at the local elementary school. They came in wide-eyed and quiet, sitting in a circle around Max as Claire told the story. Eleanor sat nearby, smiling faintly, her fingers never far from the shepherd's fur. And Max never gave up, Claire said softly. Even when the world thought she was gone, he knew. He always knew. A small girl raised her hand. Does Max have superpowers? Eleanor chuckled, her voice still weak, but full of joy. No, sweetheart, he just has love. That night, as the stars shimmered above and the wind danced through the trees outside their window, Claire found Eleanor sleeping peacefully. Max lay beside her bed, alert but calm. Claire whispered, "You saved her, boy." Max blinked slowly, as if he understood every word, and deep in the quiet stillness of the house, it felt like love itself was standing guard, ready for whatever came next. It was a quiet Sunday morning. Rain tapped gently against windows. Eleanor sat by the fireplace, a wool blanket draped over her knees, her fingers slowly stitching the edges of an old quilt she had started long before her collapse. Max lay beside her chair, calm, but with eyes that still scanned the room like a silent sentinel. Claire was sipping coffee when the doorbell rang. She frowned. They weren't expecting anyone. She stood, opened the door, and froze. An older man stood in the doorway, tall, thin, with salt and pepper hair and eyes that burned with quiet intensity. He held his hat in his hand, rain dripping off the brim. "Good morning," he said. "My name is Dr. Malcolm Harrow. I believe you've been expecting answers." Claire hesitated. "I'm sorry, we don't know any Dr. Harrow." But the man gently stepped forward, pulling a weathered leather folder from beneath his coat. "I was Eleanor's attending neurologist 5 years ago, before she left the city hospital." Claire's heart skipped. That was before her diagnosis. "Yes," Harrow replied. "Before she was told she had severe anxiety and was dismissed with medication. But I disagreed with the diagnosis. I believed something far more complex was happening." Eleanor turned her head toward the voice. Her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. "I remember you." Dr. Harrow gave her a kind smile. "I'm sorry I didn't fight harder." They gathered in the living room. The fire crackled between them. Dr. Harrow opened his folder and revealed old test results, notes, and neuroscans. "I suspected Eleanor had a rare neurological condition called progressive catatonic syndrome," he said. "It's related to catalepsy, but harder to detect. The episodes can mimic death. No pulse, no breathing. In most cases, it's misdiagnosed fatally." Claire swallowed hard. "You tried to tell them?" "I did, but I was overruled. Her case was closed." Then she moved away. I lost contact. He looked down. "And then, 3 weeks ago, I read the news. The woman who woke up at her own funeral. I knew it was her." Eleanor's voice cracked. "Why are you here now?" Dr. Harrow met her eyes. "To tell you what likely saved your life. Not just Max's loyalty, but his ability." Claire blinked. "His what do you mean?" "Your dog," he said gently, "is likely a medical alert animal. Not trained, but naturally gifted. There are rare cases of dogs with instinctual neurosensory awareness. They detect chemical changes in the human body. Some can smell seizures. Others, cataleptic episodes." Claire stared at Max, stunned. "You're saying he sensed she wasn't gone?" Dr. Harrow nodded. "Not just sensed. He knew. It's likely that when her episode occurred, Max detected the absence of true death. Her body chemistry was still alive." The room went quiet. The only sound was the rain outside, falling softly, almost reverently. Eleanor whispered. So, I wasn't saved by luck. No, Dr. Harrow said. You were saved by something far more powerful. He looked down at Max, who watched him silently. Instinct, love, and a gift that can't be explained by science alone. Claire sank onto the couch beside her mother, overwhelmed. For weeks, they had believed Max's barking was born from love, and it was. But now, they knew it was also something deeper, something extraordinary, a bridge between life and death. And Max had stood on that bridge, refusing to move. Spring came early that year. The snow melted slowly from the sidewalks, giving way to green grass and blooming wildflowers. The days grew longer, the skies brighter. And inside a modest house on the edge of town, something even more remarkable had taken root. Hope. Eleanor sat by the open window, sunlight dancing across her pale skin. Her strength had returned more quickly than expected. Each day brought more color to her cheeks, more light to her eyes. And Max remained by her side, his eyes always watchful, his devotion unchanged. He had become more than a companion. He had become legend. Claire launched a blog, originally meant to document Eleanor's recovery. But within weeks, it exploded into something far greater. The story of Max's refusal to accept his owner's death had captivated millions around the world. Newspapers called it a miracle of instinct. TV shows requested interviews. A local university even invited Claire and Dr. Harrow to speak at a medical ethics conference. But none of that compared to the flood of letters that came in, handwritten notes, emails, packages, from people who had suffered misdiagnoses, people who live with rare neurological conditions, and from families who had lost someone too soon. Max had given them more than a headline. He had given them hope. One afternoon, Claire opened a letter from a woman in Montana. Her daughter had passed away suddenly, declared brain dead after a seizure. But she wrote that, after watching Max's story, she had requested her daughter's records be reviewed. Turns out, the diagnosis had been premature. Her daughter had been alive when they pulled the plug. The mother wrote, I can never get her back, but because of Max, someone else's child might survive. Claire showed the letter to Eleanor, who wept softly. Max just curled up at her feet, calm, as if he already understood the weight of what he had done. Not long after, something unexpected happened. The local mayor stopped by their home with a small metal plaque in his hands. We'd like to honor Max, he said with a proud smile, with the city's very first Service Companion of the Year award. They held a ceremony at the park. Dozens gathered. Max stood at the center, tail wagging humbly as children patted his head, and the mayor spoke. Claire gave a small speech. Her hands shook, but her voice never cracked. She ended with these words. He didn't speak our language. He didn't follow a textbook. But when no one else believed, Max did. He knew what love was. And he knew what life felt like, even when it was hanging by a thread. The crowd erupted into applause. Max looked up, then barked once. Clear, strong, unmistakable. Back at home that evening, Eleanor said something that stayed with Claire forever. You know, she whispered, looking down at Max, it wasn't just his barking that saved me. It was the fact that he never stopped. Claire nodded, tears in her eyes. He waited. Eleanor continued. Outside that casket, in the cold, he waited because in his heart I wasn't gone. And so the world kept spinning. But in one small home, a miracle had happened, not with flashing lights or divine voices, but through the unwavering love of a dog who believed, beyond reason, that his person was still alive, and because he believed she was. Max didn't just bark at a coffin. He barked at death, and death that day stepped aside. If you were moved by this incredible story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss an amazing tale like this. Stay with us for more heartwarming and unbelievable stories.